Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the heir of the Uzumaki clan and got harem? Part 5. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. 1 month later. After training with Heir for the rest of his free time, Naruto had learned a lot from the man. He had excelled in his sword fighting skills, and also he could use a variety of new jutsu along with Kenin jutsu. He wasn't able to learn how to use the technique that Jiraiya promised him, but he had worked on it every now and then, knowing that it would be useful to have. Also during this time he ran into the 3 girls every now and then, but few words were spared, especially when the time drew near for the final round of the exams to start. Everyone was training with their parents, teams, or friends, so free leisure time wasn't available to everyone except those who were perfect already. From there the story picks up. "Crud, I'm gonna be late for sure," Naruto muttered as he walked along towards the arena. He had slept in by accident, and when he woke up he couldn't find the suit he wanted to wear for the fights. He had finally come to a final solution and chose to wear his battle gear that he had yet to try out. It consisted of a pair of black pants that had metal stitching in them, a tight blue t-shirt with his clan symbol on the front, and a black cloak with his clan symbol on the back. His sword sat diagonally on his back without his usual scroll. He figured it would lessen his load in the fights. "I have 10 minutes to get to the arena," he cursed as he began to run along the deserted path. "If only there was a faster way," he said and shook his head, dismissing the thought of using a shunshin. That would be a waste of chakra that he could afford, but he rather didn't. As Naruto ran he thought about his opponent. "So Kiba in Yuzuka, he's strong, but he's also rash like me," Naruto thought as he leapt over a cart. "But I bet he learned a lot of crap in the last month after training with his family," Naruto finished as he ran. He didn't even notice the small shadows until it was almost too late. "Whoa," he yelled and pulled back as a barrage of senbon hit the ground in front of him. "What the hell?" he yelled and looked around wildly, but he only found a shape of someone sitting on a streetlight, their face covered in shadows. "Who are you?" he demanded as he drew his sword out slowly. "You mean, you forgot me already? Naruto-kun?" a feminine voice said sweetly and Naruto froze. "Ah, Haku-chan," he muttered and the girl giggled softly. "Bingo," she said and dropped from the streetlight. "Why are you in a rush?" she asked sweetly, beeping her head to the side. Naruto didn't answer her because for one he was in shock from seeing her and two he was shocked to see her new attire she wore. She had on a pair of tight black pants and over that she had on a blue shirt that was tight at the bottom but loosened up around her chest and the collar fell around in ruffles. On the sleeves he could see a small spiral which was the symbol of his country. Around her neck her hit hung loosely like a necklace. "Why are you wearing that?" he mumbled and then shook his head. "Why are you here?" he shouted, gesturing wildly. "Oh, Naruto-kun, be quiet," Haku said, shaking her head. "I was convinced by Zabuza to try and wear some other things if I wanted to stick out more," Haku said with a blush that was barely noticeable. "Other than that I am here to support you," Haku said with a small grin and looked past Naruto's shoulder and up at a roof behind him. "Don't tell me," Naruto said and turned around to see a man crouching on the ledge of a building, a giant sword on his back. "Zabuza-sensei," he yelled and the man chuckled loudly as he dropped from the building and landed lightly in front of the blonde. "Yeah, it's me, keep it down, I'm a wanted man, eh?" he said with a grin. Zabuza stood up straight and Naruto saw that he too had changed his clothing style. He now wore a pair of loose shorts that came below his knees and on his legs he had metal braces. He wore a white collared dress shirt with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows and the shirt unbuttoned to reveal his muscular chest. He no longer wore the bandages around his face and his hit was tied around his arm tightly. "Why are you guys here?" Naruto demanded, looking around for Anbu. "Because, you need some family to root you on, don't you?" Zabuza said, slapping Naruto on the back. "Besides, I thought we could get in some training before the exams started," the man said with a grin. "The exams are about to start in 5 minutes," Naruto yelled and Zabuza winced. "Saw that coming, well then let's go and we can talk on the way," Zabuza muttered and pushed Naruto along with Haku trailing behind him. After a minute Zabuza finally spoke. "So how much have you showed them?" he asked simply and Naruto got serious. "Everything but the summoning. I had no choice, I had to pull out all the stops in the prelims and in the forest," Naruto said and Zabuza nodded. "Have you learned anything new?" the man asked seriously. "Yeah, I trained with Jiraiya and he taught me the Rasengan," Naruto said and Zabuza stopped walking. "You what?" he whispered. "I learned the Yondai Maze technique," Naruto said and stopped also. "What else have you learned?" Zabuza said, recompassing himself. "I learned Kenin jutsu, a special sword jutsu style that this guy named Heir invented. He also taught me a handful of Suiten jutsu. But that's not all of it," Naruto muttered and Zabuza looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Zabuza asked. I made contact with the QB and he altered the contract. Naruto said and Zabuza stared at Naruto in shock. What did he do? Zabuza demanded. He made it so that I could summon the demon foxes also that's it beside the fact that I can use his chakra now. Naruto said with a shrug. We'll talk about it later, but for now. He said and grabbed both teens and they disappeared in a swirl of water. Barry appeared right in front of the gate and the two guards jumped back in shock. Naruto chuckled lightly and rubbed his hair. I'm here. He said and the two guards looked at each other. You're not gonna make it, you have to be in there within the next 10 seconds. They mused and Naruto sighed. Damn it. He roared and Zabuza smirked. No problem. The man said. Uh-oh. Naruto groaned. Last but not least, is Uzumaki Naruto here? Genma shouted out, but there was no response. Uzumaki, are you here? He said again, but suddenly the arena began to shake. What the hell? Taiyuyu muttered as she held her ground. Look out. Everyone heard a familiar blonde scream as he crashed through the doors riding a giant wave. Everything became complete chaos as the water roared about the stage and when it settled people were standing in an ankle-deep sea. Naruto sat in front of Genma soaking wet while rubbing water out of his eyes. Here he said, and the final round of the Chunin exams began. Will the first contestants please stay down here while the rest of you go on upstairs? Genma said as Ninja rushed downstairs to deal with the watery mess. Naruto stood by himself in a balcony while he watched Neji and Gaara face each other. He already knew how this match would turn out, even if Neji was supposedly the strongest genin in Konoha. Naruto looked around and found Temari standing with Kankuro, Taiyuyu with her teammate Kodo, and Ino with Lee, Shikamaru, and Kiba. Haruko, Sasuke, and Tenten all stood in their own places by themselves probably going over how they would fight their opponents. Naruto shifted his gaze back to the two fighters and watched with keen interest as Genma dropped his hand and leapt backwards. Neji and Gaara stood stock still watching each other carefully. Slowly Naruto could see the evil grin spread across Gaara's face before a spear of sand shot out at Neji. The Hyuga dodged to the side and brought his leg around and made contact with the sand spear, destroying it and throwing sand across the ground. He ran at Gaara and brought his left hand down to his while he ran, and when he was right in front of the boy, he thrust it upwards with it, trying to make contact with the redhead's jaw. A wall of sand shot up though, and Neji's hands bounced off of it before the Hyuga jumped back, narrowly avoiding the spikes of sand that shot out from the sand. He landed lightly and stared at Gaara, who let the wall of sand flow back down to the ground. Naruto couldn't hear Neji, but he saw veins appear around his eyes, which meant he was using his Byakugan. Naruto rolled his eyes as Neji used his bloodline, even though it would be pointless. Of course he could see chakra better with the Byakugan, but he couldn't predict one's movement with it like the Sharingan, which would be the best jutsu to have right now, but even then, an Uchiha wouldn't be able to predict the movement in the sand. Neji ran at Gaara, his veins in his temples bulging as he settled into his Jaiuken. He brought his arm around with his fingers curled and he thrusted it forward at Gaara's chest, but again the sand foiled his attack, only this time when Neji made contact with the sand it exploded and sent sand skittering across the perimeter around the two fighters. Gaara jumped backward some and swept his arm around, and a wave of sand erupted from the ground and roared at Neji, who used his rotation attack to avert the damage. Where did you get so much sand? Neji demanded and Gaara smiled evilly. The entire time that man was talking, I was already getting ready for my fight. I was breaking up rocks and minerals in the earth with my chakra and soon I had an unlimited amount of sand at my disposal. Gaara said and he grinned even more. But so funny, you're still going to lose. It's your destiny. Neji said and ran at Gaara. This match is over now. You bore me, besides there is someone I am too eager to fight. Gaara said and his eyes flickered towards Naruto for a split second. Neji brought his leg around at Gaara's head, but the boy grabbed it with a sand claw that formed around his arm and he threw Neji across the ground. The Hyuga skipped and skidded before he came to a stop in the middle of a large sand pile. He stood shakingly to his feet and wiped some blood from his mouth. You're gonna pay. He muttered and dropped back into his fighting position, but alas he didn't realize his mistake. Got you? Gaara whispered and made his hand jerk in a quick circle. Suna no Arashi. The sand around Neji began to whip around in a cone until the boy was engulfed in sand that was spinning around wildly. No one could see the Hyuga, but they could hear his cries of pain and agony. Gaara spit on the ground as he watched the storm batter and attack Neji until finally Genma barked. That's enough. He yelled. Gaara paid him no attention, but instead he made the sand spin faster before he finally let it stop and disperse. When it did Neji was no longer recognizable. His skin was completely torn up like someone had taken sandpaper and rubbed it raw. There were large chunks of flesh and meat missing on his arms and legs, and his face was a bloody mess mixed in with his long brown hair. Neji fell to his knees, and Naruto watched as a medical team ran out and very carefully picked him up and put him on a stretcher. They carried the meat boy out of the arena, and Gaara smirked before walking towards high balcony where Temari and Kankuro stood. Sadistic bastard. Naruto muttered and shook his head waiting for the next match. Kodo vs Ino. Genma yelled and people cheered as both contestants dropped into the arena. This should be quick. Naruto mused as Kodo stood with his hands in his pockets. Oh. Genma said dropping his arm. Ino immediately rushed to Kodo hoping to get him with a kunai, but the boy shook his head slightly and when she drew near, he backhanded her and sent her flying. She hit the ground and skipped a couple times before she finally came to a crouching stop. Ino looked up with anger in her eyes before she closed her eyes in thought. Kodo yawned lightly as he drew out a kunai waiting for Ino's next move. The blonde suddenly opened her eyes and smirked as she made a triangle with her hands and muttered something. Naruto watched as Ino's body suddenly slumped and Kodo looked at it with amusement and began walking towards it, unaware of what the girl just did. As he walked, Naruto was shocked to see him suddenly stiffen straight up and then suddenly grin. Kodo brought the kunai that was in his hand to his throat and looked at Genma. "Call the match before I kill him," Ino said with Kodo's voice. "Didn't see that coming, stupid Odo Nin," Naruto muttered as Genma raised his hand. He was about to drop it when suddenly Kodo's body shook and the kunai dropped to the ground. Ino's body jerked violently suddenly and she sat up straight but not before Kodo had her head pinned down with her foot and was pressing down harder and harder. "Little fish," he roared and Naruto clenched the railing tightly. "Call the match," he thought as Kodo brought out a new kunai and brought it down towards Ino's throat. "Call the match," he roared and Genma looked at him before shaking his head. The man raised his hand and dropped it before Kodo made contact with Ino's neck. That was all the time needed. Kodo's hand was stopped dead in its tracks by a sword that was pointed at the base of his neck. The boy froze stock still and didn't dare move in the slightest way for fear that his head got chopped off. "Drop the kunai," Naruto said in a cold voice. The crowd was silent and Ino was staring at him in shock. "Dead off," Kodo managed to say, but his voice cracked and betrayed him. "Drop the tucking kunai before I drop your head," Naruto said as he pressed the blade against the boy's neck. He was rewarded with the sound of the kunai dropping and he pushed Kodo away from him. "Get," he ordered and took one look at Ino. "Thank you," she whispered and sat up. "Whatever," Naruto muttered and disappeared in a vortex of water. He reappeared back in his balcony and ignored the looks that were cast at him by many. Stupid girls. He thought as he watched Genma call out the next fighters, the two Naruto really didn't want to see fight. Tayuya vs Temari. Genma roared and everyone exploded into cheers and applause. The villagers knew about the rivalry they had going on for Naruto, even though the villagers themselves hated the boy. "Time to die, fish," Tayuya said happily as they both landed in the arena. "Oh, this will feel good. Naruto-kun's not here to hold us back and I got my fan and permission to use jutsu," Temari said and Tayuya smirked. "So you're saying that you're going to beat me?" Tayuya asked and Temari smirked. "Then what are you going to do, fight Naruto?" Tayuya asked and Temari looked at her in horror, she had forgot about that. "I sir," Temari began. "I surrender," Tayuya yelled loudly, drowning out Temari. Genma stared at the two girls in shock before he shook his head. "Fastest match in the world," he said as the battle of words was over. The villagers booed and gave thumbs down as Tayuya skipped towards the steps, leaving a seething Temari standing there. "You fish, Naruto loves me," she shouted and Tayuya stopped dead in her tracks. "Boy, ref dude, I take back my forfeit, I'm going to kill this fish," Tayuya screamed as she threw herself at Temari. Both girls snarled as they collided in a heap on the ground and fought with each other. The crowd cheered wildly as they ripped each other's hair in scary ways. Temari grabbed Tayuya's boob and twisted it sharply, and Tayuya roared in pain before grabbing Temari's cheeks and stretching them as far as she could. Temari began to punch Tayuya's obviously sensitive chest over and over, while Tayuya bit down hard on the blonde's shoulder. "Oh my god," Kiba muttered. "At least they're not using jutsu. Gyuten. Yupuru Oten. Sekitsuya Shitsubusu." The funnel of wind slammed into a large pillar of earth, sending sharp rocks flying in every direction where they embedded themselves in walls. Tayuya and Temari stared at each other angrily as they panted heavily. Neither girl moved from where they stood, and Naruto knew that this would be a long fight if things went on like this. He sighed and walked towards the steps so that he could go and busy himself with another task. "Winner Tayuya," Genma said as he dropped out of the tree he was hiding in. Tayuya stood panting over an unconscious Temari who was laying in a crater holding her bent and broken fan. Tayuya had beat the girl unmercifully and had become the victor despite her attempt at trying to lose. She stood up straight and brushed her hair that was covering her face in a pink storm and smiled at the crowd who was silent after seeing the epic battle. "Told you I'd kick her ass," She mouthed to Naruto, who was watching with boredom. Next match, Naruto vs Kiba. Genma announced and Naruto sighed. Of course he was next, he almost forgot. He jumped up on the railing and dropped to the arena below and put his hands behind his head as he walked towards Genma. Kiba dropped down into the arena also and Akamaru yipped from his jacket. Kiba cracked his knuckles as he stared at Naruto with anticipation. Ayuya walked out, only glancing at Naruto, who she would have to fight next, and made her way up the stairs to her own balcony with her teammate, Kodo. Naruto flexed his shoulders, adjusted his sword some, and stared evenly at Kiba. Slowly his emotionless mask crept across his face and he ran through his head, thinking about the techniques that he had seen Kiba use in the prelims. I only saw 2 attacks, Ujuin Bunshin and Gatsuuga, but he had time to learn more stuff, so this should be a challenge. Naruto thought to himself and didn't even notice Genma start the match. Kiba smirked as he saw Naruto thinking hard and quickly took the opportunity to start his offensive maneuvers. He dropped Akamaru out of his coat and the dog hit the floor just as Kiba made a seal. Ujuin Bunshin. Akamaru suddenly turned into a feral-looking Kiba along with the original Kiba. The two looked at each other with snarls and then looked at Naruto and charged. Kiba dashed forward at insane speeds and when he drew level with Naruto, he slashed down at the blonde's face. Naruto raised an eyebrow and brought his hand up and caught Kiba's blow almost reflexively. Naruto snapped out of his dreamlike state and grinned to Kiba. "Let's get it on," he said and spun in a circle and threw Kiba at Akamaru, who was diving at him from the sky. The two collided and were sent flying backwards, where they came to a rest and got back on all fours. "Bring Uzumaki," Kiba roared, and both enemies ran at Naruto and flashed from side to side. Naruto tried to keep his eyes on the real Kiba, but it was no use. By the time the two reached him, he had lost him and had to just try and fend off attacks. Kiba and Akamaru ran in circles around Naruto until they became a grey blurry tornado cyclone that just raged wildly. Naruto swore as he ducked under a clawed hand that shot out to scratch his face. As he ducked, another hand darted out and grabbed his leg and threw him into the cyclone, where he was bounced back and forth while being torn at. Naruto slammed his hands together finally and shouted. "Suiten. Dabaku Mizumshai no Jutsu." A pillar of water shot up from the ground and condensed into a large ball of water. Naruto grabbed onto the side and applied chakra to his hand and threw himself up and over the water and the grey cyclone Kiba was making. As he flew through the air, he made a quick hand seal and the ball of water imploded and then exploded, making a large star that spun and slammed into both Kiba and Akamaru. The two were immediately sent flying in different directions, where they skipped until Kiba hit the wall and Akamaru slammed into the tree. Naruto landed lightly where the water had now dispersed and lay in puddles on the ground. Naruto chuckled as he realized that this would make water jutsu easier if he didn't have to constantly convert his chakra to water, pull moisture out of the air, or draw water from the ground over and over. He watched as Kiba slowly got to his feet and wiped the water off his face while glaring at Naruto. "I'm gonna kick your ass," Kiba roared and made a hand seal. "Atsuga." Kiba ran at Naruto before he jumped into the air and began to rotate at high velocities. He was like a human drill, and Naruto swore as he jumped to the right, avoiding Kiba narrowly. He grinned until suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his back and he was sent flying forwards and then up. Suddenly he found himself flipping up and wildly through the air. He looked down and saw Akamaru landing next to Kiba, who was already making another hand seal. "Shit." Naruto yelled and made a cross seal. "Age Bunshin no Jutsu." 40 Bunshin appeared in the air and started making a human ladder that reached back down toward the ground. It spiraled like a staircase, and Naruto grinned as he jumped on Clone's back and began to run around the clone's steps, gaining speed. He pulled out his sword and began to gather water around it while he let out a low growl. He neared the end of the case, which was 10 feet above Kiba, who was getting ready to jump at Naruto. Naruto brought his sword back and dived downwards while doing a quick spin. "Suken. Mizul Gama. Raiten. Inazuma Sakurin." Naruto swore as the water scythe flew off of his blade at the lightning clone. Water was weak against lightning, so there was no doubt that he was about to feel some pain. He braced himself as the two jutsu collided, sending electrically charged rain splattering in every direction until suddenly the cyclone of electricity hit him square on. He roared in pain as the cyclone shocked his entire body, making him go rigid. He couldn't use a water jutsu to get out of this, hell, he couldn't even move. The electricity was messing up his central nervous system, and he knew that the fox would have to work quick if he wanted to win. "Well, I guess it's the only way," Naruto thought as the cyclone dispersed and he fell to the ground with an audible thud. He lay there with his eyes closed and Kiba stood panting as he stared at Naruto, wondering if he had won. "Did I win?" Kiba asked Genma, who looked at Naruto curiously. "Nope," he muttered, and Kiba threw his hands up. "Why not?" he demanded. "Because he is the #1 most unpredictable ninja," Genma said and watched Naruto suddenly shift position and he tried to get up. Give me some of your chakra and fix my damn nervous system. Naruto yelled and the fox growled. Don't speak down on me, mortal. QB said as chakra leaked from its cage. Shut up, you furball, I'm the damn ruler here. Naruto said while spitting at the fox. He didn't have time for games. Is that true? If you were, then you wouldn't need my help. QB said with an evil grin. I'm not getting your help, Naruto said while looking QB straight in the eye. I'm collecting your fucking rent. He yelled and QB roared. Take the chakra and leave, your nervous system will be healed in no time. But that Naruto chuckled and left. Naruto 2 QB 0. Naruto's eyes shot open as red chakra seeped from his skin and whirled around him, sending pebbles and dirt flying. Kiba jumped back, ending his argument with Genma as he stared at Naruto in shock. No way, that technique is supposed to make people immobile. He yelled as Naruto slowly and shakingly rose to his feet. Well, I'm not normal. Naruto said as he grabbed his sword off the ground. You're about to find out why too. He said and started making hand seals. Well, that's my cue. Genma said and started jumping away. Naruto began to focus all of his chakra into the next attack but forgot at the last second what would happen now. Oh well, best time to learn, I guess. He said as he bit his thumb and slammed it into the ground. Uchiha no jutsu. There was a large flash of light and everyone was blinded. After the light faded, all anyone could see was Kiba and Akamaru standing next to each other in their original forms while Naruto was surrounded in a reddish-blue smoke. What the? Kiba muttered to himself and suddenly Akamaru began to growl. What is it, boy? He asked and squinted into the smoke and saw something move. What the hell? He yelled as a purple and black shape detached itself from the fog and slammed straight into Akamaru, sending him rolling backwards. Ah, nice one, whatever your name is. Naruto yelled and flew out of the smoke with 10 clones in tow. The crowd, despite its shock, suddenly broke into loud cheering. This fight was getting good. Naruto landed in front of Kiba and smirked. You're on the receiving end of my taijutsu style now. He said and brought his foot straight up into Kiba's jaw. The Inyazuka shot straight up into the air where the Naruto's clones jumped up to receive him. Naruto watched and waited while the clones began the complicated series to a special taijutsu kata that Naruto had remixed for himself. The first clone jumped up and brought its leg around and caught Kiba in the gut and sent him flying to the side, where a clone jumped up and drilled its knee into the boy's back. Kiba flipped head over heels into the sky where 3 clones, in quick succession, kicked him around and damaged his torso. As Kiba hung in midair, the final 4 clones appeared around him in flashes of blue and grabbed onto his shirt and in perfect unison, threw him back down towards the original Naruto. Kiba rocketed downwards and Naruto grinned. This was the conclusion to the battle and it was going to count. Naruto brought his hands out in front of himself and focused his chakra. He poured all he had left into the final blow, making it as effective as possible. Kiba was closer now, only 20 feet away, so Naruto would only have one shot at this. He shot his hands up into the air and held them as though he was cupping water, and then he roared. Suiton. Suso Chikoasu. Water that was in the air and ground shot up and began to spin in his hand. It turned bluish-white as it raged around in a circle and then shot upwards in a straight beam. Kiba couldn't do anything but scream as the water slammed into him and sent him flying at the wall of the arena at high speeds. He slammed into it and slowly fell to the ground, soaking wet from the attack. Blood was trickling down his face, mixing together with the water to make it less thick. Naruto panted heavily and turned towards Akamaru and the fox he summoned. He saw that the fox had beaten Akamaru and the dog now lay unconscious in a small pile, bleeding from several bite and scratch wounds. Naruto chuckled as he fell to one knee, panting. The last few attacks had really pushed him to his limits since his nervous system wasn't completely healed and he had taken a fair beating. He looked at his hands and saw that they were bone white from the attack and he swore. He hadn't completely learned how to use the attack yet and had only been practicing it for a week. He had to force tons of chakra into the small water ball he had in his hands and then make it explode towards a target. He wasn't able to make the chakra go in a straight line in one direction yet, so he received recoil from it and it would mess up his hands for a little bit. Naruto stood up straight and stuck his hands in his pockets and looked at Genma. He's not getting up after that A-rank jutsu. It was a direct hit after I used an advanced jutsu kata. Naruto said and Genma shrugged and pointed at Kiba who was on his hands and knees. Son of a fish. Naruto cursed and growled. Stay down, he said, and Kiba snorted. As if I'm going to listen to you. He sputtered out and pushed himself to his feet. He swayed back and forth while he slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out 4 pills. 1 red, 1 black, 1 blue, and 1 white one. Kiba smirked as he popped the blue and black one into his mouth. What the hell? Naruto yelled as Kiba glowed blue for a little bit. One of those pills was made by Hinata, it's a healing pill, and then I took special solider pill that replenished all of my chakra. Kiba said and ran at Naruto. The blonde ducked under Kiba's punch and was surprised when the boy continued on and did a one-handed handspring and grabbed Akamaru and slid to a stop near the tree. He opened Akamaru's mouth and pushed the white pill into it and set the dog down. "That was a special dog healing pill made by my sister," Kiba said as Akamaru's wounds knitted themselves shut. "This is another special dog solider pill, just watch," Kiba said with a smirk and threw the red pill up into the air. "Bet it, Akamaru," Kiba yelled, and the dog jumped to its feet and ate the pill. Naruto watched as the dog began to shake violently and then suddenly something changed. "What the hell?" Naruto muttered as the dog turned red and began to grow. It grew until it was the size of a cow and it let out a roar. Akamaru couldn't yip anymore. "It's a growth hormone that the Inuzuka clan makes. A dog can only eat one every 30 days and it makes the dog grow 10 times its size. The effects only last for an hour, but it will be enough time to beat your ass," Kiba said with a grin as he began to run through Hant's seals. Bujuin Bunshin. Kiba disappeared in a cloud of smoke, and when he was visible again he looked just like Akamaru, only less vicious. He roared together with his dog, and Naruto took a few steps back. The fox that he had summoned jumped and landed next to him. It was only about waist height when it stood, and behind it swung 4 tails. The fox was midnight black that shined in the light. On its head were 3 purple strips that came together to make one solid and thick stripe that ran all the way down the fox's back and branched out to cover all 4 of its tails. Along the thick strip little stripes reached out, giving the fox a tiger-like look. Under its eyes were purple crescents and its eyes were purple speckled with black. Its claws all had purple triangles on them and the fox itself looked demonic like it was. The tips of its ears were also purple, only they had black streaks going through them. "So guess this is good of time as any. What's your name?" Naruto asked while settling into a fighting stance. "So you're the summoner, damn kid," the fox said in a voice that made the fox seem like a teenager itself. "Hey. Asked a question," Naruto said angrily, and the fox snorted. "And I didn't answer it," the fox said while eyeing the dog with a savage look. "It's Kanten though," Kanten said and looked at Naruto. "You must be the QB's container, right?" the fox asked, and Naruto made a face that said shut the hell up. "Yeah, now shut it and help me," Naruto said and watched as the 2 dogs rushed at them. "With pleasure," Kanten roared and reared his head back. "Yaokai no Kumketsukumsen." The purple and black ball formed in front of Kanten's mouth and shot out at the dogs. It took on the form of a tornado as it moved and tore up the ground. By the time it was near Kiba and Akamaru, it looked like the colors black and purple were swirling around each other. Kiba and Akamaru were able to dodge out of the way, and the beam of demonic light slammed into the wall of the arena and made a crater that was 3 feet deep and 4 feet in diameter. Naruto gawked at the attack, and Kanten coughed. "Whoops, I missed," he muttered and dodged the 2 figures charging at he and Naruto. Naruto cursed and jumped up and landed on Kiba's head and slammed down hard with his foot. His hands were still healing, so he had to utilize his feet for now. Kiba roared in pain and bucked around, which sent Naruto flying. The blonde landed and skidded with his feet and glared at Kiba. He had to figure out how to beat this annoying bastard. It was then that he heard Kiba growl out when he and Akamaru began running at him again. "Raiden. Gatsuga." The 2 dogs jumped into the air and spun around and made a giant drill again, only this time around it had electricity coursing through it. Naruto could see a little ball of lightning at the tip of the drill and knew that if he wasn't careful he would die from a direct hit. He rolled out of the way of the attack and watched the duo go up and then come flying back down at Naruto. "Shit," he thought and began to run away from the drill. Kiba and Akamaru roared across the ground, making a trench that was 10 feet wide and 4 feet deep. Naruto ran directly at the wall, and before he hit it he jumped up and began running up it. He looked down and grinned when Kiba flew at it. "Not getting up here," Naruto thought, but Kiba changed direction and traveled straight up the wall, not even losing momentum. "Come on," Naruto yelled and started to run up the wall. As he ran he felt his hand slowly healing still and knew that if he could last for another 5 minutes, he would be able to Sujutsu again. He ran and got to the top of the wall and jumped. As he flew above the stands he saw villagers looking at him in shock. "Oh," Naruto thought and jumped away as Kiba roared up after him. There was a loud scream as the front row of people's hair was singed and burned as the human and dog roared by, but Naruto didn't stick around to listen. He dropped to the arena and looked at Kanten, who was picking at his teeth with a claw. "Shoot him quick," Naruto yelled, and Kanten yawned. "Fine," the fox muttered and opened his mouth where a bowl of purple and black energy formed. "Yaokai no Kumketsukumsen." The beam of demonic light shot at the electric drill and hit it dead on. There was a large explosion in the sky and black smoke filled the top of the arena. When it cleared, Kiba and Akamaru were falling to the ground, smoke trailing off of their bodies. They hit hard and Naruto clenched his fist as he regained control back over them. He smirked and started running through hand seals quickly. His next attack was only B ranked, but it would still be enough to hopefully finish E2 off after that attack by Kanten. If they didn't give up he would have to use Rasengan on them and he really didn't want to show that move yet. He landed on the last hand seal and water began to surface around him and swirl around in a circle. This is the end. He muttered and Kanten chuckled. Hopefully I'm hungry. He replied and Naruto smirked. We'll go get some ramen after this. The blonde shouted as water shot up around him. Suiton. Suryudan no Jutsu. The water dragon towered above them and roared, sending water droplets everywhere. Naruto swung his arm towards Kiba who was standing to his feet now. Akamaru was also up and Naruto cursed. He couldn't hit them both, but he knew who needed to be taken out. The water dragon slammed into Kiba's body and went flying upwards. Kiba spun on the dragon's snout and when it finally dispersed he fell to the ground limply. Naruto chuckled and watched as Akamaru caught the boy on his back and set him on the ground where he lay still. Done. He said and Genma shook his head. Nope, that attack isn't enough to take out someone on a solider pill. The man said and Naruto cried in agony. I'm seriously about to kill him. The blonde said and Genma shrugged. Knock yourself out. He muttered and Naruto watched as Kiba made a hand seal and transformed back into the giant dog again. Naruto knew what was coming before it happened even and he started preparing for it. He glared at the Inyazuka in front of him and brought forth QP's chakra finally. All of the red chakra he had been holding back surged out suddenly and made a little circle that whipped dirt around him. Naruto slammed his hands together. He heard several shouts of protest in the crowds and knew that people made the connection already. Naruto smirked as Kiba and Akamaru ran at him again and started their electric drill move. Raiden. Gatsuuga. Naruto slammed his hands together making the final seal and pouring all of the chakra he had built up into it. It wasn't the strongest jutsu he had, but it would be enough to finish the match. Suiton. Mizukik no Jutsu. The ball of water formed in front of Naruto and the boy sent it flying at the electric drill and turned towards Genma and smirked. Match. He said and there was a loud explosion and he felt Kiba skid up on one side of him unconscious and Akamaru on the other. Over. He finished and stuck his hands in his pockets. Winner. Genma said with a smirk. Uzumaki Naruto. He shouted and Naruto heard silence until suddenly. Ego Uzumaki Naruto yeah. Woe. A familiar male voice said and Naruto hung his head as he looked P and saw Zabuza standing up in his sat. That's my nephew. He roared and slammed his hands over his mouth. Nice. Naruto muttered as he saw many ninja looking at Zabuza, trying to place where they had seen his face. So, let's go get some ramen. Kanten said and began walking away. Why don't you go back to the summoning realm? Naruto asked with a sigh. Because, I'm your familiar now. Kanten said with a grin. I'm your first summon of the demon foxes. But I have a familiar already, but it's not like they can't return home. Naruto roared in protest. Yeah you have your other familiar, but the demon race is different so shut up and suck it up. Kanten said and sat down. But you're so big. Naruto whined. Hey. I'm small for my race. When you're 60 I'll be at least 200 feet tall. Kanten roared and Naruto's jaw dropped. What? He roared. No. He said shaking his head. Aw shut up, I was kidding Kanten muttered. I'll only grow when you make me, I get bigger when you give me a certain amount of chakra. Kanten said and Naruto sighed with relief. But you're still too big right now. Naruto said again and Kanten sighed. Well, this is my normal size since you gave me the bare minimum of chakra. The fox said and suddenly he jumped at Naruto. The blonde let out a startled cry and closed his eyes, but when he opened them he found that Kanten was a chibi size, which was about a foot tall and sat on his shoulder now. Better? Kanten asked angrily. Yup. Naruto said and walked towards the steps as medics carried Kiba and Akamaru out with some trouble. Now let's go get some ramen. Naruto said. Shikamaru vs Tenten. Genma called out and Naruto chuckled. There was no point in sitting around since he didn't really care who won this next match, even though he knew that it would be Shikamaru, since the boy was a sheer genius. Naruto walked towards the entrance of the arena for civilians and started walking down the steps when he walked by a figure that made his blood freeze. Both of the two stopped walking and Naruto shook uncontrollably for some odd reason. What the hell? He asked himself mentally. Who are you? He asked in an angry whisper. Why do I feel this way? He demanded. Nice match Naruto. A feminine voice said and Naruto turned around and looked at the girl. Who are you? He screamed. Kanten was also standing on his shoulder growling. We will meet again but for now. The girl said and dropped the heavy cloak that was around her. She was wearing a pair of tight black pants and over that she had on a tight black t-shirt that was a button-up and it was completely unbuttoned. It revealed her cleavage which was a little smaller than Tayuya's, but instead of flaunting it, she had on black metallic fishnet. She had on boots that went up to her knees, and Naruto saw a stud on each of her heels. She wore a headband around her waist for a belt, and it was blank. She had on a pair of black gloves with black see-through metal studs on each knuckle. Wrapped around one of her arms was a black chain with small razor-sharp knives on each link. On her back was two swords that were slightly smaller than Naruto's own sword. Their hilts were black with a white snake wrapping around it for finger grips. Naruto looked at her face and saw that despite the fact that he absolutely hated her right now, she was beautiful. Her eyes were a forest green, and she had pale skin. She had long green hair that hung down past her shoulders, and it was braided so that two braids hung down in front of her chest, while the rest of it flowed loosely behind her back. She was frowning at Naruto, and he could see hate etched into her own features. Naruto felt something roar inside of him, something that had a sense of evil about it that was completely different than QB's evil. Naruto clenched his fists as he fell to one knee. "I said, who are you?" He grunted out as he looked at the girl who was glaring at him. "My name?" she asked and stepped closer to him. "Is Uzumaki Nasumi." "Wait, Uzumaki, that sounds like." Naruto trailed off. "You're right, you should ask your mentors Abusa where your clan originally came from and why it was so special," Nasumi said as she stood to her feet. "Oh yeah, ask him when he's going to tell you about your family curse," she said, and suddenly a vortex of red water swirled around her and she disappeared. Naruto got to his feet and stared at the spot she just stood in shock. "Uzumaki Naruto Whirlpool, Uzumaki Nasumi Crimson Whirlpool," he said to himself, and Kontan growled from his shoulder. "That girl, you must ask your uncle about her clan, her presence, it feels familiar," the demon fox said, and Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I will later, but I need to eat, I feel weak," Naruto said. "Are plans in effect?" an evil slimy voice asked. "Yes, Orochimaru-sama. When shall we begin the evasion?" a silver-haired teen asked. "As soon as the exams are over, this way I can get the Uchiha after he is weakened and possibly take out the QP brat also. But most importantly, I can finally kill Orochimaru," said, and stood slowly to his feet. "The area here is in the council, but most importantly I can destroy Konoha," Orochimaru said with a cackle. "Holy kami kitsune. This is awesome," Kontan said as he lapped up the rest of his ramen broth. He pushed the bowl into a pile next to him, making the total bowls rise up to 20. "It has something to do with demon heritage," Naruto said after looking at his own 25 bowls. "Would make sense," Kontan said as he nuzzled his maw with his paw. Naruto burped and chuckled as he fished money out of his wallet. He slapped down the amount due and grinned at AM and Ichiraku, who were staring at the fox. "So are you guys going to come to the last round of the fights?" Naruto asked, and Ichiraku chuckled. "You're pretty confident, eh?" he asked, and Naruto chuckled. "You remember those three girls?" Naruto asked, and AM nodded. "Well, I passed the first round, I beat Kiba," Naruto said excitedly, finally breaking the good news. "Alright," Ichiraku said, and AM high-fived Naruto. "Now what about those girls?" he asked, and Naruto chuckled. "Well, there are only 3 rounds in the finals, and since I won mine I move on to round 2. My opponent is Tayuya, the pink-haired girl. She had to fight against the blonde girl from Suna's scary match, but anyways neither wants to fight me, so I already know she is going to forfeit," Naruto said with a shrug. "Besides, I couldn't let myself lose to her," Naruto said in a whisper almost. "Sexist asshole," AM said, hitting him on the head with a ladle. "Ow. That's not why a boy named Gaara, he Naruto said sadly and leaned forward and whispered in Ichiraku's ear. "Naruto, you can't let that girl make it past round 2 no matter what," Ichiraku said seriously. "From the sounds of it, that boy will kill her." "I know, that's why I have to get to round 2, I have to fight him. Also the Uchiha is going to make it there most likely. If he can make it past Lee, that is, which he will do. He really wants a piece of me after the prelims," Naruto said and rubbed his head. "So you're going to have your hands full in the next round," AM said and chuckled. "Sounds like both boys want to kill you." "They do, but I can't die," Naruto said sadly. "I'm too important," he muttered, and both people in the stand nodded. "We will be there, Naruto, to root you on as you become a Chunin and as you beat the hell out of the Uchiha," Ichiraku said, and Naruto smiled. "Thanks, Jai-san," he muttered and sighed. "I better get back to the arena, Shikamaru's match is over and Sasuke's is just beginning. I want to root Lee on," Naruto said and stood to his feet. "Come on, Kontan." The fox chuckled and jumped up on Naruto's shoulder, making the transaction from normal size to chibi size. Naruto waved as he departed and walked out onto the street. Ichiraku waited until he was gone until he turned to AM. "That boy," he muttered, and AM nodded. "He doesn't have it easy, I hope the Gaara kid doesn't kill him," AM whispered. "Do you think he can beat him and the Uchiha?" Ichiraku asked his daughter. "I want to say yes, but the Uchiha is an Uchiha and the boy is a Jinchuriki," AM whispered again as a tear made its way down her cheek. "So you want to watch the Uchiha's match, eh?" Kantan said as they walked among the street which was deserted since it was the exam day. Yeah, I want to see what he has learned. Naruto said and looked at the giant arena. Besides, I want to talk to someone. Naruto said and walked towards the arena. It only took him 10 minutes to get there, and when he did he found two people waiting for him. It was none other than Zabuza and Haku. As he drew near, Haku smiled and Zabuza grinned. Nice match. Zabuza began, but Naruto cut him off. Thanks, what are you guys doing? Naruto asked curiously. Well, Haku has something for you, and I wanted to tell you that the boy won the fight. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded. Good, he might be able to beat Sasuke if he passes on. Naruto mused and Zabuza shook his head. No, I mean that the Uchiha passed on, he beat Lee easily. The match only lasted for about 10 minutes. Zabuza said, and Naruto slammed his fist into a wall. What happened? He demanded. The Lee boy was beating the Uchiha senseless, but suddenly the Uchiha used a reversal on a kick that Lee was using, and it shattered his leg. Lee tired to go on fighting, but Sasuke started using a familiar fighting style that was slightly changed and ended up hitting him with a Gakkaku hat on. Poor kid suffered some serious burns since he couldn't protect himself with chakra. The second round begins in 15 minutes. Zabuza said, and Naruto swore and began walking. He copied the fucking Uzumaki fighting style. Naruto yelled as he walked. Naruto-kun, wait. Haku said, putting a hand on her hip. Zabuza-san just said I had something for you. She said, shaking her head. What is it? Naruto asked hurriedly. Well, since you're in a hurry here. Haku said, rolling her eyes and pulling a bag out of his pocket. In it were a dozen purple pills that were the size of a nut. Take one and it will replenish all of your chakra, heal all of your injuries, and give you an energy boost. Take 4 now and you'll have back all of your energy, put the remaining 6 in your pocket and don't lose them or you'll be sorry. Haku said, and Naruto smiled at her as he took the bag. Thanks Haku-chan, it means a lot. He said and gave her a tight hug and kissed her cheek. Haku blushed and smiled at Naruto. No problem Naruto-kun, now go kick some serious ass. She said, pushing him towards the entrance of the arena. As he disappeared through the doorways, Zabuza looked at his pupil. Haku, you're changing. Is it Naruto? He asked, putting a hand on Haku's shoulder, and she smiled lightly. I guess so, he just rubs off on you. She muttered. Yeah, but is he ready to hear the truth? Zabuza said with a sad smile. Haku looked at Zabuza sadly and shook her head. He has time, right? She whispered. It should be happening to him soon. Zabuza muttered and started walking towards the arena. When? Haku asked with tears in her eyes. In the next 3 months at least. Zabuza said and then turned to Haku. Will you be ready to destroy him if he loses? He asked seriously and Haku wiped away a tear on her face and slowly nodded. Yes Zabuza-san, I will. She said and Zabuza nodded. So will I, he said. So will I. Naruto ran into the arena and found himself near the staircase which he ran up. He had a target in mind and he wouldn't be satisfied until he found them. He ran around the circular chamber that was in the arena that led to other balconies and he finally came to the one he wanted. You fucking bastard. Naruto yelled as he stepped toward Sasuke. What? Sasuke yelled back and fell into a familiar fighting stance. You stole my fighting style. Naruto said and clenched his fists. You don't deserve it. Naruto screamed and Sasuke smirked. You said that about the Kage Bunshin too. Sasuke said and Naruto froze. What do you mean? Naruto said slowly as red chakra seeped from him. Well, you wouldn't teach it to me, so instead I learned your fighting style and a lot of your jutsu too, thanks. Sasuke said with a smirk and Naruto launched himself at the Uchiha. Freeze Naruto. Kakashi said, appearing in front of Sasuke. Kakashi. Naruto spit out at the man. You probably told him to use it. Maybe I did, he is my student. Kakashi said and Sasuke smirked. Yeah, so was I, Naruto said and remembered something from training with Jiraiya. Flashback, no jutsu begin. I would ask Kakashi, but he is an asshole, Naruto muttered and Jiraiya looked at him in confusion. What do you mean? He asked with some anger in his voice. Kakashi only trains Sasuke, he is a total ass to me, he nags, and is always punishing me for stuff. He wouldn't teach me how to walk on trees because I wouldn't teach Sasuke the Kage Bunshin. Naruto said and Jiraiya shook his head in disappointment. You'd think he shows some respect for his own sensei's son. Jiraiya said. Flashback, no jutsu end. You'd think you would treat your own sensei's son with respect, eh? Naruto asked and Kakashi froze as the blood drained from his face. What? He managed to say. You heard me, Kakashi, you disappoint my father. He would want better of you, he was the one who taught you that those who leave comrades behind or turn on them are lower than trash, right? Naruto said and turned. Naruto, you know who your father is? Kakashi whispered. Naruto turned around and saw his chance. Yes. I do. He said and left the room. Kakashi sat staring at the spot he just stood in horror. Who is his father, Kakashi-sensei? Sasuke asked and Kakashi shook his head. It's an S-class secret punishable by death. Kakashi muttered and fell to his knees. So who told him? Kakashi muttered to himself. Naruto walked away victoriously. Of course he still didn't know who his father was, but he knew that he could solve that problem soon enough. He was going to just ask around until he found out. It shouldn't be too hard. Naruto grinned as he walked towards the next balcony and found exactly who he wanted and someone he didn't care for. Oda and Taiyuya stood talking to each other in hushed whispers, and when he appeared Taiyuya immediately shut up. "Naruto-kun," she whispered and Naruto smiled at her softly. "Taiyuya, we have to talk," he said and she beeped her head. "Get out of here, you fucking loser," Kota said and drew out a kunai. "Kota, I will kill you if you even dare," Taiyuya said evilly and Kota froze. "Whatever, I'll kill you in the final round," Kota said and Naruto shrugged. "If Gaara doesn't kill you," he said and turned to Taiyuya. "That's why I'm here, I want you to forfeit," he said and Taiyuya looked at him in shock. "Why? You think I'm too weak to fight you?" she demanded and clenched her fists. "No, because I would have to beat you senseless to make sure you didn't pass on into the final round. I won't let Gaara or Sasuke take you from me," Naruto said turning away from Taiyuya. "Naruto-kun? What do you mean?" Taiyuya asked and Naruto looked at her. "He will kill you, you weren't there in the forest of death, but you saw what he did at the prelims. He does that in all of his fights, I guess. Just look at Neji, he won't be able to ever be a ninja again," Naruto yelled and Taiyuya bowed her head. "If you want that, but you better win then," she said and reached into her back pocket. "Take these, they're a gift," she said and threw Naruto the pair of gloves she had custom made for him, which he caught and stared at. They were definitely better than his plain gloves he had. "Thank you, Taiyuya-chan, but I can't guarantee that I will win," Naruto said, bowing his head. "I have to face Uchiha and Gaara. Don't doubt my skills," Kota screamed and Naruto glared at him. "Wanna see something cool?" Naruto asked and suddenly a lance of water stabbed the wall next to Kota's head, faster than the boy could see. "Ya bastard," he yelled. "That's what Gaara's sand is like, and no offense, but you barely could beat Ino, who isn't very skilled," Naruto said and clenched his fists. "Taiyuya, please just do this for me," he said, and she nodded and he turned his back. "Okay, Naruto-kun, be safe," she whispered and he nodded. "I'll try." With that he disappeared in a vortex of water, but not before his last words echoed throughout the chamber. "Maybe we can go on a date tomorrow." Taiyuya broke down crying, and Kota looked at her sadly. "I told you not to get attached to anyone, it will only make it harder." "I know," Taiyuya said between sobs. "Orochimaru-sama, why?" she cried out and Kota sighed. Naruto arrived at his own balcony and looked out at the field and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the bag of pills and poured them into his hand, popped 4 into his mouth and stuck the rest in his pocket. He swallowed the pills and pulled off his gloves. He threw them to the side and looked at the gloves Taiyuya had given him. They had reinforced metal stitching that was fireproof, waterproof, and also windproof. They also had metal plates installed along the knuckles to pack an extra punch. Naruto looked at them and saw that on each knuckle was a diamond stud that was attached to a metal base. They could cut through a lot, and also he could focus chakra into them easier. He pulled them on and looked at the palms. They both had his clan crest on them. The crescent moon was silver and the spiral was blue, and they stood out on the black material that was the gloves. "Thank you, Taiyuya," he whispered and strapped the gloves on and flexed his fingers. They fit perfectly, and he knew that they would shred apart in battle or training, unlike his other gloves which did after a while. Naruto looked at the field and felt his energy returning to him as he watched Genma call out to the crowd, getting their attention. The second rounds began now. Gaara versus Kota. Genma yelled and the two walked out onto the field. Naruto knew how the match would go, and he had tried to unnerve Kota enough so that he would surrender, but he was too stupid. Naruto watched as Gaara crossed his arms in front of him and Kota drew out 2 wicked-looking kunai and held them at his sides. Genma dropped his arm and Kota acted immediately. He ran at Gaara and slashed down at the boy's face, but to no avail. Gaara's hand shot up and grabbed Kota's arm and crushed the kunai. Kota jumped back in shock and shot a glance at Naruto before looking back at Gaara, who was grinning. "Did he tell you to surrender to me?" Gaara asked evilly. Shut up," Kota screamed. "You should have listened," Gaara said, and his hand shot out and started to creep up Kota's arm until it was at his shoulders. The boy tried to escape, but his struggles were futile. Gaara beat his head and clenched his hand, and Naruto covered his ears as Kota's ear-splitting scream rocked the arena. Gaara laughed as he made sand cover Kota's mouth. The boy could only stare at Naruto, begging for help, but Naruto shook his head and Kota cried. He was about to die and he knew it. Genma watched with horror, not even thinking about stopping the match. Gaara picked Kota up off the ground with the sand still attached to his arms and made the sand slam Kota into the ground in front of him and then behind Gaara. He did this over 20 times, and when he was done Kota was a bloody mess and Naruto could see that he was still alive. Genma regained himself and called the match, but no one could hear anything as Kota screamed again. Gaara slammed him into the arena wall at insane speeds. He brought the boy back and proceeded to slam him into the wall over and over until there were large red splatter prints all over the concrete. Gaara then threw Kota into the air and his broken body flipped uncontrollably before Gaara made sand shoot up and grabbed him. Gaara slammed his arm downwards and the boy's body flew at the earth where it slammed into it and a spray of red decorated the entire arena. Gaara grinned as his sand made its way back to his gourd, leaving the dead teen where he lay. Naruto watched with disgust and he looked over at Tayuya who was shaking in horror or maybe anger, it was hard to tell. Naruto looked and saw Kota's corpse, mangled and pretty much dismembered. He no longer had arms and was missing one leg which was laying a few yards away. His head was also half gone now. "Sick bastard," Naruto said as his blood froze. "We have to fight that?" Kantan asked from his shoulder, shuddering. He was a demon and he was scared shitless. Yes," Naruto said. "Why is he so evil?" Kantan asked, shaking his head. "He is a Jinchuriki like me," Naruto said, and Kantan looked at him in shock. "What?" he yelled. "Yeah, he has the Shukaku sealed in him," Naruto said, and Kantan shuddered. "Damn," the fox said, and Naruto nodded in agreement. "Yup," the blonde said, and watched as Genma called the next match after the body had been dragged away and the blood burned. "Naruto versus Tayuya," he called out, and Tayuya hesitated before calling out. "I forfeit," she said sadly, and Genma nodded. "Winner, Uzumaki Naruto," he said, and the crowd was silent. Next match, Shikamaru vs Sasuke. Genma yelled and the crowd began roaring and cheering wildly. "Damn Uchiha," Naruto muttered and watched as Shikamaru walked into the arena lazily and Sasuke dropped from his balcony. "Ready, fight," Genma yelled and Sasuke smirked. "Ready to lose? Or are you going to sit there like a fag?" he asked, and Shikamaru sighed. "You're so troublesome," he said. Shikamaru crouched down and looked around the arena. It was beneficial for him to be fighting right now since it was noon and the sun was casting more shadows upon the grounds. He scratched his chin and watched as Sasuke became impatient and threw a barrage of kunai at him. He rolled sideways as the kunai passed him and he settled into his thinking stance. Sasuke growled and ran at him and kicked at his head. Shikamaru leaned backwards and rolled to the side again as Sasuke brought his fist down on the spot he just was crouching in. Shikamaru jumped to his feet and turned and threw his foot at Sasuke's head and the boy ducked under it and Shikamaru smirked. "Gotcha," he said, and his shadow shot out and snagged Sasuke's own. "Kagime no Jutsu success," he muttered, and Sasuke swore loudly as he tried to move but couldn't at all. "Let me go, faggot," the Uchiha roared, and Shikamaru smirked. I have no choice, I can only hold you here for another 10 seconds anyways, but I just proved that I can easily beat you," Shikamaru said and drew out a kunai and brought it toward Sasuke, while Sasuke brought an empty hand forward. Shikamaru had his kunai at Sasuke's throat just as his jutsu wore off and he smirked. "I forfeit," he said, and dropped the kunai that was 5 inches from Sasuke's throat. "Damn faggot," Sasuke muttered and growled and brought his fist back in order to strike Shikamaru. "I'll show you never to touch an Uchiha," he roared and threw his fist at the unprepared Shikamaru. Crack. Sasuke grunted as Naruto held his fist in his own hand with a scowl etched across his face. "Hey fag muffin, ready to get your ass handed to you?" Naruto asked and grabbed Sasuke by the collar of his shirt and threw him over his head. Shikamaru ducked under the boy as he flew and chuckled. "Thanks," he muttered and started towards the steps. "No problem," Naruto said as Sasuke hit the ground and skidded to a stop. Genma stared at the two in shock, but suddenly Gaara landed next to him with a grin. "Round 3," he muttered and walked towards Naruto and Sasuke. Sasuke was on his feet in a fighting stance already and Naruto walked up and stopped about 10 feet from the boy. Gaara stopped 10 feet from each of them also so that they all made a triangle. Naruto looked back and forth between Gaara and Sasuke with a small smirk. "So much for our break," he muttered, and Gaara chuckled evilly. "No need, you didn't fight, I wasted barely any energy and all the Uchiha did was embarrass himself, but other than that his match only lasted for 5 minutes. Gaara said, and Naruto chuckled. True, he said and clenched his fist. "So who's going to get their ass kicked first?" he asked, and Genma dropped his hand and the crowd became deathly silent. "Suna no Arashi. Kaiten. Kankakyu no Jutsu. Suiten. Daibakufu no Jutsu." The 3 jutsu collided together and created a huge explosion, sending all 3 ninja flying backwards. They all landed and skidded before running at each other in an intense battle. Naruto threw a roundhouse kick at Sasuke. Sasuke ducked under it and caught Gaara's foot that was flying at his now exposed side. Naruto continued his roundhouse and it slammed into Gaara's face. The sand boy was sent skidding backwards holding his face which was now cracked slightly. Naruto only stared at him for a split second before Sasuke's fist was slammed into his gut and he was sent rolling. Naruto was sent skidding backwards on his back before he swung his legs around and came to a stop on his feet. The three stood staring at each other before charging again. Naruto fell into his Uzumaki style, Gaara into his Sandstorm style, and Sasuke fell into the Uchiha style. Gaara threw a punch at Naruto's head and behind it was a pillar of sand. Naruto ducked under the blow and brought his foot straight up toward Sasuke's jaw. The Uchiha sidestepped the kick and grabbed Naruto's foot and threw him into the air. Naruto spun around and grabbed Gaara's leg as it rocketed towards his face. As he held Gaara, a spike of sand shot up at him. He swung Gaara around in midair and threw him in front of the sand spike which stopped immediately. Naruto landed on the ground and ducked under a chop aimed at his neck by Sasuke. He dropped low and swung his legs around and tripped the boy. He brought his leg up and around and slammed it into Sasuke's chest only to have him transform into a log. Sasuke dropped from the sky and threw a barrage of shuriken at Naruto. Naruto drew his sword out and deflected all of the shuriken but one. He grabbed the weapon out of midair and spun and threw it at Gaara. A wall of sand shot up and the shuriken got stuck in it. Gaara grinned and flicked his fingers out towards Naruto and Sasuke. Soon a shuriken. Hundreds of sand shuriken shot out at Naruto and Sasuke who were forced to dodge. Naruto managed to get away with only a few scratches, while Sasuke was hit in the legs with several shuriken. Naruto watched as the Uchiha jumped backwards and began to make hand seals. Pain. Karyoden no Jutsu. Sasuke blew out a large fire dragon that spun as it flew at Gaara. The Jinchuriki chuckled and threw up a wall of sand that stopped the dragon which exploded and covered the boy in heat. Naruto knew what the effects of this would be and grinned. He ran at the spot that Gaara now stood and beat his fist back, focusing his chakra into the diamonds that were on his gloves. He slammed his fist into the spot that Gaara's sand should be and grinned as he heard a crunch. He felt the sand that had turned into glass shatter and explode towards the boy. Blood. Gaara screamed and Naruto saw that he had cuts all over his face and neck. I'm going to kill you. He screamed and slashed his arm at Naruto. A wave of sand flew at the blonde boy and he tried to dodge, but the sand grabbed him. Gaara waved his arm at the wall and Naruto slammed into it with a groan. Gaara spun his hand in a circle and the sand gathered up and made a large spike. Gaara slammed his hand down and the sand spike flew at Naruto who was in a daze. Just before it hit him though, Sasuke came up and hit Gaara in the back of the head with his foot, making the boy lose concentration. Naruto watched as the sand spike fell apart in front of him and he rolled to the side and looked at Kanten, who was holding on for dear life. You can help. He muttered and Kanten chuckled as he jumped off Naruto's shoulder and converted to his regular size. Okay then. The fox said as he landed. Naruto watched as Gaara caught Sasuke's fist in a pillar of sand and threw the boy into the air. Naruto watched as Gaara spun in his circle, bringing his leg around with a roundhouse kick and it slammed into Sasuke and sent him crashing into the arena wall. The Uchiha made a crater that was 3 feet deep and he hung in the crater as blood trickled down his forehead. Naruto grinned and turned back towards Gaara who was snarling at Naruto. I'm going to kick your ass. He yelled and ran at the boy. He made a cross with his fingers. Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. 50 clones appeared and they all charged at Gaara who grinned with bloodlust. He swept his arms in circles and slashes and sand cut through Naruto's clones like butter while at the same time they beat Gaara. Finally, after 10 minutes, Gaara destroyed the last clone and Naruto stood panting heavily as he stared at Gaara. Sasuke was pulling himself out of the wall slowly and was making hand seals and Naruto watched as he ended on the snake seal instead of the usual fire seal. He watched as Sasuke's fingers all glowed a different color. What the hell? Naruto wondered as Sasuke took off running towards Gaara. He watched as Sasuke suddenly changed direction and jumped at him with his hand outstretched. Bagwafuin. Naruto doubled over in pain as Sasuke's hand slammed into his gut where his seal that held the QP rested. He fell to his knees holding his gut and Sasuke smirked before bringing his foot around and slamming it into his face. Naruto was sent rolling before he finally came to a rest, still holding his gut. What the hell was wrong with this? What had the damn faggot done to him? Naruto slowly struggled to his feet and watched as Sasuke traded blows with Gaara before getting a swift jab in on the boy's shoulder and then being knocked backwards. Naruto knew that this fight was going nowhere. The crowd wanted an all-out battle royal and by hell they were going to get one. Naruto brought his hands together and made a cross seal. Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. Naruto disappeared in a large cloud of smoke and when it cleared only 4 clones stood by his side. He looked around in shock wondering what had just happened. He had used enough chakra in the last jutsu to make at least 200 clones. It was then that Naruto realized what had happened. Sasuke had used a seal and sealed his chakra or had disrupted it somehow. Son of a bitch. Naruto swore as he ran at Sasuke. He slammed his fist into the boy's face, just as Gaara slammed his foot into his gut. Sasuke was in the process of throwing a kunai at Gaara, and so all three ended up damaging each other. Naruto was sent flying backwards, skipping a few times, Sasuke was sent down into the ground, and Gaara was slashed across the face, drawing a thin line of blood. My blood, my blood. Gaara began to cry again as he held his face. I'll kill you. He screamed and sand began to rage around him. It took on the shape of a sphere and enclosed him inside. Naruto slowly stood to his feet and watched the process. What the hell was the kid doing now? Shit, I'm too tired. Naruto said, but remembered that Haku had given him the pills. He reached down to grab some but found something that made him almost cry. His pockets were torn out and the pills had fallen through, well, all but one. It sat in one of his folds and he carefully pulled it out and stared at it before popping it into his mouth. He immediately felt the effects of the pill. He could feel his chakra returning and he felt more energetic also. He allowed himself a small grin while he watched the sphere that Gaara had trapped himself in. What was happening in there? Naruto watched as the sphere began to crack suddenly and he knew that whatever was coming would be very, very bad. He watched as the sand sphere crumbled and Gaara stood crouching with a brown see-through chakra cloak around his body. He had two pointed ears that looked like a dog's and behind him swayed one tail, and Naruto gasped as he felt the killing intent coming from the boy. What the hell? Naruto asked himself as he gasped wildly. It's so intense. He cursed inside his mind. It's the Shukaku, the cloak, it looks like a wolf. Naruto thought as he looked at the cloak more closely. Come and die. Gaara screamed and slammed his hands down and a wave of sand rose up and towered above both Naruto and Sasuke before it crashed down. Naruto did 5 backhand springs and dodged the sand while Sasuke used his speed to run from the sand. He did a couple backflips up the arena wall and crouched there watching Gaara, who was growling at him. Naruto cursed as Sasuke began running through hand seals. You fucking idiot, he's going to kill you. Naruto swore and began to think. He watched as the sand began to recede towards Gaara and gather around him, and soon Gaara was standing on a platform of sand that was 15 feet off the ground. Naruto jumped back and followed Sasuke's lead and landed on the arena wall and stuck himself with chakra, which was very hard despite his control. He felt himself slipping slowly and so he grabbed 2 kunai from his pouch and slammed them into the wall and stood on them. He leaned backwards as he thought about what he could do. Use my chakra, boy. He heard the QB say from inside him. Why should I? Naruto thought back and the fox chuckled. Because I can destroy that seal you have placed on you. It is weak and if a true Fuin master had placed it then it wouldn't be coming off unless he or another master took it off. QB said and Naruto sighed. Do it. Naruto thought and he felt QB chuckling and suddenly an insane amount of power began to seep through him. He felt red chakra pouring out of his body and he felt the seal on his stomach burning wildly. What was happening? Naruto roared as pain shot through him and when he looked at himself, he saw reddish-orange chakra surrounding his entire body just like on Gaara. He looked behind himself and saw a single tail swishing back and forth and he turned and saw Gaara now glowering at him with hate-filled, looked over and saw Sasuke holding his right wrist with his left hand while lightning suddenly began to spark in his palm until suddenly his whole hand was engulfed in lightning. Sasuke smirked and ran down the side of the arena, leaving a trench where the attack dragged against the concrete. He ran down on the ground and jumped up on the sand platform and roared out victoriously. Chidori. Naruto watched as a wall of sand shot up and wrapped itself around Sasuke's arm. The Chidori died prematurely and Gaara beeped his head at Sasuke and grinned evilly. Naruto knew what was about to happen before it even happened. Gaara clenched his fist and Sasuke's arms, which was completely encased up to his elbow, was crushed inside Gaara's sand. Sasuke screamed in pain as Gaara dropped the sand and his mangled arm fell to his side uselessly. Naruto watched as Gaara reared his hand back and brought it forward and it slammed into Sasuke's body and sent him flying straight at the arena wall where he crashed with a large explosion that sent concrete chunks scattering. Naruto watched as the dust disappeared and saw that Sasuke was in a very large hole that was about 10 feet in diameter and was about 7 feet deep. There was no way the Uchiha was getting up after that. Naruto reverted his attention back to Gaara, who was now glaring at him and he watched a grin slowly cross across the boy's face. Now the real battle begins. Gaara roared and stood up on 2 feet but still couched down some so that his hands hung by his legs. Let's do this. Naruto roared back and felt the seal on his stomach disappear suddenly. Oh yeah, my chances just got better. Naruto thought as he ran down the side of the arena. Gaara jumped off his sand platform and let it crumble to the ground as both Jinchuriki rushed at each other. Both beat their fists back and when they drew close threw them at each other. Boom. Boom. The arena shook and the audience sat stock still in the seats as a large dust cloud rose up into the air. Everything was deathly silent, and while the citizens thought that a powerful jutsu was being used, every ninja that was alive when the Kyuubi attack knew full well what was going on. The Hokage stared at the large dust cloud with an angry look etched on his face. "What is going on down there?" he demanded, and in a black flash a Anbu member was kneeling at his side. "Hokage-sama, we have reports that both Jinchuriki have begun to release chakra from their contained demons. Shall we take immediate action?" the Anbu member asked and looked up at the Hokage. Hiruzen stared at the arena thoughtfully with a scowl etched on his face still. He was about to answer when another male voice cut him off. "Don't worry about it. Naruto still has control. I'm not sure about Gaara though, but still, if you were to interfere, not only would the crowd demand to know why, but also Gaara may go berserk and start killing everyone. I say we leave this up to Naruto," Jiraiya said and hopped off the top of the press box and landed next to Hiruzen. "That sound right, Sarutobi-sensei?" the white-haired Sannin asked, and Hiruzen sighed. "Agreed, but I want Anbu posted all around the edge of the arena in case immediate action is necessary. Go," the Hokage yelled, and the Anbu disappeared and the old man turned to his former student. "So, have you found out when Orochimaru is going to attack?" the man asked, and Jiraiya chuckled. "He's going to attack as soon as the exams finish. We have at most an hour to prepare," the Sannin said, and the Hokage nodded sadly. "Inu." the Hokage barked, and Anbu in a black cloak appeared before the Hokage. "Start procedure A52 Case 39 Defensive Maneuver 21. the Hokage said sadly. "Hi." Inu barked as he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. "Let's see how this match plays out. Also keep an eye on that damn Uchiha, will you?" Hiruzen said to Jiraiya, who chuckled. "Gladly," the man said, and they returned their attention to the match. Naruto coughed as he looked around for Gaara. As soon as they had collided, he had lost track of where the boy was at, and since his chakra cloak was brown, he blended in with the dust. As Naruto turned right, he felt a sudden change in the pressure to his left, and he ducked just in time to avoid a clawed hand that was aimed for his head. Naruto lashed out blindly, but his fist struck nothing and he fell into a defensive stance. He couldn't risk just running around, since he had no idea which way was north or south. He also couldn't start making shadow clones because they would just fight each other, since they would be blind in this dust. Naruto sighed as he tried to think of a way out of this. He could use another jutsu to cancel the effects of the dust, but since he only knew water jutsu, he would take the chance of turning all of the dust to mud. If that happened, then the field would be much harder to fight on than before. As Naruto thought, he felt another change in pressure and ducked as he felt a foot coming towards his head, but as he ducked he felt a fist crash into his gut. The air was blown out of him as he was sent flying backwards at insane speeds. He only had a second to think before suddenly he felt Gaara's leg slamming into his back and sending him flying forwards. As he hurtled head over foot, Gaara must have appeared in front of him because he felt a fist crash into his face and it sent him hurtling upwards. Naruto groaned in pain as he flipped higher and higher into the air until suddenly he busted out of the giant dust cloud. He took in a deep gulp of fresh air and stopped himself from flipping wildly about. As H flew in the air, he spread his hands out and tried to adjust himself so that he was floating somewhat and not just hurtling pointlessly through the air. He watched as a part of the dust cloud shot up in a pillar and Gaara appeared from it. The red-haired boy was snarling furiously as he shot towards Naruto, who clenched his fists waiting for the boy to get closer. Gaara beat his fist back and let loose a right hook aimed at Naruto's face. Naruto flipped forward and slammed his foot into Gaara's angry face, while said boy's fist slammed into his side. Naruto grunted in pain while Gaara screamed angrily while trying to claw at Naruto. Naruto managed to let himself start falling faster, and so he dodged the boy's wicked hands. As he fell, he grabbed Gaara's legs and used his momentum to flip himself and Gaara around at fat speeds until suddenly he let go of Gaara and the boy was sent hurtling towards the earth. Gaara disappeared inside the dust cloud, and a second later a large pillar of dust shot out and into the air, showing that Naruto's attack had worked and Gaara had slammed into the earth. Naruto began running through hand seals and he landed on the last one while shouting. "Kurigakur no Jutsu." Mist seemed to shot from all sides of the arena as it merged with the dust and soon overwhelmed it. Naruto fell towards the mist cloud and disappeared inside of it. He landed lightly on the ground and looked around with his eyes closed. Zabuza had taught him how the jutsu really worked when he first learned it. Since the mist was infused with one's chakra, it meant that if there was a disturbance in the chakra or a foreign chakra, one would be able to sense it. Naruto was simply looking for the massive outpour of Gaara's chakra. It didn't take long for him to find it and it was about 10 feet away. Naruto grinned as he slowly pulled out his sword. Naruto watched as the red demon chakra slowly begun to boil and it encased the sword slowly until there was a glowing outline of red on the blade. Naruto chuckled as he began to approach Zabuza with an assassin's stealth. When he was a step away he swung downwards at the boy's head and grinned as he felt the blade sink down into where the boy's arm was. Naruto began to pull his blade back, but it wouldn't budge at all. He grunted with effort to yank the blade back, but suddenly he felt something running across his feet and he didn't have much time to react before sand shot up at him. Naruto yelled in anger as sand began to encase his body. Shit. He screamed as he was yanked away from his sword. He cancelled the effects of the Kurigakure, and after about 4 minutes the mist had completely disappeared and the entire audience could finally see what was going on. Naruto heard gasps as he stood with sand creeping up his body slowly. Gaara's sand was at his neck now, and Naruto saw that his sword was stuck in a sand Gaara. Naruto saw the sand that made the Suna clone falling off the clone, and it was now holding him. In front of him stood a grinning Gaara who was holding his hand outstretched. How the hell? Naruto demanded and Gaara beat his head to the side as he grinned at Naruto sadistically. You overconfident, you thought that I couldn't see you because of the mist. This entire arena has sand on it. My sand with my chakra. I could sense where you were walking, you idiot. Gaara roared and jumped forward and grabbed Naruto's sword form, the now misshapen Suna Bunshin. Naruto grunted as Gaara held the sword that Naruto had come to love in his hand with a grin on his face. This damn sword makes me angry. I'll use it as a demonstration of what's about to happen to you. Gaara screamed as sand shot up and encased the sword. Gaara pulled his hand out from the sphere of sand encasing the sword, and as soon as it was out he clenched his hand together and Naruto's face fell darkly. The sand compressed and then bent and twisted in different shapes. Naruto watched as Gaara released his hand and the sand fell to the ground and in it were shards of Naruto's now destroyed sword. My sword, Naruto mumbled as he stared at the destroyed extension of his arm. You bastard. Naruto screamed. Zabuza had crafted the sword for him as a gift and now it was gone, destroyed. Zabuza had taught Naruto that a sword was a swordsman partner. Naruto had just lost that partner. You're next. Gaara screamed as sand shot up and covered all of Naruto. The blonde disappeared in the sand sphere and the audience tensed as the match started to show how it was going to end. Naruto. Ta-Yu screamed as the sand covered the body of the boy she had extreme feelings for. She smashed her fists against the rail as tears streamed down her face. It's better this way. I won't have to fight him. She said, trying to console herself. The pink-haired girl fell to the ground crying. No. Temari screamed as she covered her eyes in sadness. Jiraiya. I want the Anbu out now, stop this match. The Hokage screamed and Jiraiya chuckled. Don't count that kid out yet, Jiraiya said and pointed towards the arena. Die. Gaara screamed as she clenched his fist together and the sand imploded and there was an explosion of red. Hhhh. Gaara screamed as he was blasted backwards. He slammed into the wall and landed in a crouch as he stared at the area that Naruto had been standing. His sand had exploded and some had turned into glass, while a lot of it was now blown back against the edge of the arena. Naruto stood panting while his demonic chakra flickered before disappearing finally. My turn. He muttered and ran at Gaara while making a cross seal. Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. The crowd of about 20 clones appeared around Naruto and all 21 Narutos ran at Gaara. They threw themselves at the red-haired boy as they pummeled him. Gaara roared in anger as he took the beating until finally he threw his hands apart and a large wave of chakra blew the clones away in a large cloud of smoke that quickly dispersed. Naruto was thrown backwards and skidded to a halt. He watched as Gaara clawed at the ground wildly as sand began to creep up his body. After a minute the sand had encased his body in a thin coat all the way up to his chest. His shoulders, arms and head were untouched by the sand coat. What the hell, Naruto muttered and suddenly Gaara screamed as he threw himself at Naruto. Die. The boy screamed. Suddenly in flash of black and purple content appeared in front of Start. In front of his mouth was a black and purple ball of pure demonic energy. Yaokai no Kaketsukasen. The ball exploded in a black and purple tornado and slammed into Gaara's body. Naruto heard Gaara scream as he was sent flying backwards at the arena wall again and just as he slammed into the wall, brown chakra began to explode from his body. Naruto watched as content poured all of his chakra in his body into the attack in order to keep Gaara at bay, but Naruto knew that the demon fox stood no chance against a Jinchuriki. He's losing control. Naruto muttered as he stood to his feet and placed his hand on Content's head. He began to pour chakra into the fox so that the attack would be more powerful and the effects were immediate. The black and purple tornado grew larger and suddenly Naruto saw blue chakra mixed in with it. He heard Gaara scream louder and brown chakra began to erupt from there he was. I can't keep this up much longer. Content growled as he reared his head back and put more force into the attack. Hold on. I'm about to finish this anyways. Naruto screamed as he jumped back and made a cross seal. Hokage Bunshin no Jutsu. The clone appeared by his side suddenly and he held his hand out and began to pour chakra into it. A sphere of chakra began to form in his hand, and Naruto grunted as he poured more and more chakra into the attack. After a minute, Naruto stood with a perfect sphere of rotating chakra in his hand, and he was staring at the black and purple tornado. "Okay, Kanten, right after I jump off you had release the jutsu," Naruto screamed as he ran at the fox. "Okay. Wait, whowwww. Kanten screamed as Naruto jumped off his fox's head and hurtled through the air with the Rasengan in his right hand. He watched as Kanten reared his head back and finished the jutsu. The tornado died down and let Gaara drop to the ground. Naruto saw that Gaara now crouched on all fours and his body no longer had a clear brown cloak around it. Now Gaara was a mini-sized wolf and behind it swayed one sand tail, while Gaara's face was gone and in its place was a wolf's head with long spiky hair made out of sand. The wolf roared as it saw Naruto and Naruto swore. Gaara hadn't lost complete control, otherwise he would have been much bigger than he was now. Naruto looked and saw that even though Gaara's body was completely different, he still bore the same sad eyes, the eyes of a lone wolf. Naruto didn't have time to have sympathy for the lonely boy because the wolf jumped up at him, snarling with its razor-sharp sand claws outstretched. Naruto and the wolf drew closer and closer, and right before they were about to collide, Naruto did a backflip in mid-flight, and his foot slammed into the wolf's jaw and sent it flipping backwards. Naruto was still flying at it and brought his arm around just as the wolf flipped again, showing its now unguarded chest to the blonde. Naruto reared his on back and let out a battle cry, the Rasengan spiraling faster in his on. "Is that? Did you teach him the Rasengan?" The Hokage yelled, and Jiraiya chuckled. "Only took him 19 days. The Sannin said, and Hiruzen collapsed into his chair. "Ami, help us all if the boy ever turns against us or we make a move against him," the Hokage muttered. "That's Sensei's technique." Kakashi screamed and pounded his fists against the rail. "Naruto, how did you learn that?" Kakashi muttered angrily. "Kick his ass, Naruto." Yeah. Zabuza screamed as she stood on top of his chair pumping his fists wildly. "Zabuza-san, sit down." Haku hissed and Zabuza looked around and saw several people staring at him. "Haven't I seen you before?" a ninja demanded suddenly. No," Zabuza said with a small chuckle. "This is the end, Gaara." Naruto screamed as the wolf roared uselessly. "After it all maybe we can be friends." Naruto screamed as he slammed the jutsu into the wolf's chest. Everything became silent as the Rasengan disappeared. Rasengan. There was an explosion of chakra as the ball of chakra reformed and blew outwards, sending the sand wolf flying at the ground. Sand was falling off of it as it hit the ground with a thundering boom. Naruto landed heavily on the ground and held his right arm, which was rather hurt now. He watched as the sand wolf slowly stood to its feet, sand streaming off its body. The head fell off in clumps and Naruto could see Gaara's shocked face looking at him. Gaara was holding his injured chest where the sand was completely gone and a large wound was there. Around the edges of the sand was glass from the intense friction of the jutsu. "What you just said, do you really mean it?" Gaara said in a hoarse voice. "That maybe we can be friends?" Naruto asked as he panted heavily. He took a step forward, but Gaara took a step back. "No. Stay away from me." Gaara screamed as he collapsed to his knees. Naruto walked closer before he stumbled and caught himself on all fours. He began to crawl forward slowly and Gaara swept his hand forward, but he was completely drained and so the sand he tried to move only rose up into the air a little bit before it fell to the ground in a pile. "Gaara, I saw your eyes, you want a friend, let me be the one," Naruto said and Gaara growled as he dropped to his side. "You fool. I want to kill you. How can you just accept me?" Gaara screamed as his sand body fell apart and was back in his normal yet torn attire. "Because you and me, we're the same, aren't we?" Naruto asked and Gaara froze. "We both know the pain of being alone, the pain of being hated, but I know what it feels like to make a friend and I can only hope that you allow me to let you have that happiness," Naruto said as he dropped right in front of Gaara. "You fool," Gaara muttered as he closed his eyes heavily. "Chidori." Naruto looked around as time slowed down to the point where it was almost frozen. Sasuke was dropping from the sky with his new jutsu in his good hand while his right arm hung uselessly at his side. Naruto looked down and saw Gaara looking at the jutsu in horror. From how drained the boy was, there was not any way that he would be able to dodge this jutsu. "Sasuke, no." Naruto screamed and reached out to stop the attack, but he couldn't. The lightning attack pierced the center of Gaara's chest and Sasuke stood standing above the boy panting heavily as he grinned evilly. Naruto shook with anger, disgust, and sorrow. The blonde felt his anger consuming him as he stood to his feet slowly and Sasuke looked up and saw the glare that he was receiving. Then there was two. "Don't cry, he had to die, he was a threat to the village, right? You saw how he killed anyone and everyone," Sasuke said as he pulled his hand out of Gaara. "Sasuke," Naruto said as red chakra began to spiral around him. "I'm going to kill you." Naruto screamed as he disappeared in a flash of red. Arg. Sasuke grunted as he arched over. Naruto's knee was buried in his gut, and by the time that Sasuke had realized what happened, Naruto had disappeared again and reappeared behind the boy. He grabbed Sasuke's neck and tossed him into the air. The Uchiha flipped head over heel, and Naruto focused his chakra into his feet and jumped into the air. He attacked Sasuke from all angles until the boy was a bloody mess. Naruto let Sasuke's body fall to the ground as he held his hands at his sides. "How dare you kill a defenseless opponent?" Naruto screamed as his eyes shifted from glowing blue to bright red, insulted. "What the hell?" Sasuke said as he coughed up blood. He didn't have much time to think because he found himself slammed into the ground by Naruto's fist. As he crashed into the ground, it spider-webbed and chunks shot up. Sasuke bounced up and Naruto spun in a circle and brought his leg around, letting it collide with Sasuke's torso. The raven-haired boy flew at the arena wall and he slammed into it. Sasuke fell to the ground, breathing heavily and holding his side. Naruto began to run through hand seals, and when he finished he held his hand straight in front of him. Water began to form in front of his hands and spiral in a ball of raging red and blue water. Sasuke pulled himself up into sitting position and stared at Naruto in horror. Naruto roared in anger as the ball condensed and then expanded before shooting out in a beam of raging red and blue water. It spiraled like a drill as it flew at Sasuke. Suiton. Suso Ichikoasu. The drill of water exploded just before it hit the Uchiha, and Naruto stood panting as he watched the water fall to the ground. Standing in front of Sasuke was none other than Hokage Kakashi. Naruto growled as Kakashi held his hand in front of himself, and Naruto grinned as he saw the streams of blood running down the Jonin's arm. Uchiha Sasuke is disqualified for the interference of his Jonin sensei Hokage Kakashi. Genma yelled loudly and then finished. The winner of the Konohagakure Chunin exams is Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto didn't even register what Genma said as he stared at Kakashi and Sasuke. Sasuke was staring at Naruto in fear and horror, while Kakashi had anger written all over his face. Naruto clenched his fists together as he felt demon chakra still whirling around his body. He wasn't in his demon cloak form, but he knew that if angered anymore he would be, and he would at least kill Sasuke finally. "You son of a bitch!" Kakashi screamed. "Who do you think you are to attack my student like that?" "I think I was a contestant in the Chunin exams," Naruto said evilly as he made clone suddenly. He held out his hand as the clone began to form a Rasengan. "I'm going to end you now," Kakashi said as he saw the technique. "You have no right to use my sensei's technique." "Ha! I have every right," Naruto said, not even registering what Kakashi said. Kakashi pulled out a kunai and took a step towards Naruto, but there was a massive explosion of water, and standing in front of Naruto was a very pissed off Zabuza. "If you ever dare touch my nephew and my student," Zabuza said as he drew out his sword, "I will kill you," the man said, and Kakashi took a step back. "Lamoichi Zabuza," Kakashi muttered. "No, Uzumaki Zabuza," the man roared, and Naruto grinned. "Meet my mom's brother Kakashi," Naruto said, and that was when a massive explosion rocked the arena. "Orochimaru is attacking," Jiraiya shouted, and he looked at the Hokage. "Let's go." "Yes, it's about time that teacher and students fight with each other again," the Hokage said. "I'm sorry Naruto, I love you," Tayuya said as she stepped back into the shadows. "Heihachi, it's time for you to go," the leader of Kusa said, and the teen in front of him nodded. "Yeah, but I hope that I get to relax after this is done," Achi said as he stretched. "Don't forget what you're here for," the leader of Kusa said. "Yeah, I know," Achi said and grinned while flashing his bright white teeth. His blue hair hung down in front of his blue eyes and his hair stretched down past his shoulders. He had on a pair of black shorts and over that he had a blue t-shirt on. He didn't wear any shoes since he ran faster without them. "Don't hesitate to unleash your power, all five tails," the leader said. "Yeah, Gobi no Wani wants out, so I should let her," Achi said with a small grin. "Do you remember who your target is? Say it," the leader demanded. "Yes. Uzumaki Naruto. When I'm done with him he will only be a piece of scrap meat," Achi said with a dark chuckle. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.